Good evening. I'd like to call our regular Committee of the Whole meeting of Monday, May 5th to order. I am the chair, Sarah Duncan, today. To my left, we'll have Chad Rintoul, Councillor Terry O'Keefe, and Councillor Richard Novak. To my right, Councillor Scott Garnett, Mayor McNeil Smith, and Councillor Steve Duck in attendance. I will begin with the territorial acknowledgement, which I'll do slightly longer today because it is May 5th, which is the Red Dress Day. So that's an extra thing to acknowledge. And the beginning of Moose Hide Campaign Month, usually I think May 16th is the day that events are done for that. And so I'll acknowledge that we are located on the traditional territories of the Wasanich people and pay our respects to the ancestors through the past who have been looking after and stewarding our shared land. Up till this point, our relationship has perhaps been negative, but we know that Canada and the province of British Columbia have recently renewed their commitment to the Wasanich Nation as beneficiaries and successors to the North Saanich and South Saanich treaties. And we hope to step forward with the intention to go forward in a good way together. I have recently read the books A Two-Spirit Journey by Mani Chakabi and Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance, which may sound like they go strangely together, but I am Métis and I think strange things go together. And I think it's important for people to study these books. Mani Chakabi's book was the Canada Reads book this year, as they show that too often on days like today we forget that the violence comes from within and comes from within our own communities. And for 250 years, we have been failing to care for each other as the same community, and we so frequently have exactly the same problems. And so, Haishka to the Wasanich, and let's go forward with good mind. I will now look for approval of the agenda. Okay, I see moved and seconded. Mayor McNeil Smith and Steve Duck. I'm sorry?
Just point of order. Sorry, I think there are two late items that we need to address.
Yes, apologies. There are two late items. There was an additional letter under 6B and for 8A as well. And with those additions, I will acknowledge the moving of the agenda earlier, and I will call the question. All those in favor? Okay, carries unanimously. The agenda is approved as amended. Is now public participation period. We will have 20 minutes, 4 minutes for each speaker. If there is somebody who would like to come forward to speak to something on the agenda who is not already a presenter, you may come forward now. And, movement from the floor.
So, good evening, committee members. Pleasure to be here, and I respect your comments about something special about today. Thank you for your words. Very quick comment. Having read through the material on the SBIA's work over the last year, I just thought it would be appropriate, since I've made comments in the past, to say that I find this a really excellent start, really good from my perspective. And I look forward to hearing the presentation and to hearing about what's going to be done in the next year to build upon what we already have. Thank you. I'm David Calverley and I live in Sydney.
Thank you, David. Okay. Calling for a second time. And a third time. Those on video can't see, there's nobody besides David in the public who's not a presenter, so I will call public participation period to a close. And I will look for approval of the minutes from our previous Committee of the Whole meeting of April 7th. Go ahead, Councillor.
So moved.
So moved. Seconded by Councillor Novak. All in favor? Okay. Carries unanimously. The minutes are approved. And we'll go to our presentations. We have two presentations tonight. We will start with that from the South Island Farmers Institute. And Katie Underwood is presenting. And you may step to the podium. So we'll load your presentation. Okay. You'll have, once you're loaded up and you're started, you have 10 minutes. And then Oh, we're just gonna move the screen for the audience, and perhaps that will appear better online as well, if you're not getting that. Yeah, 10 minutes for the presentation, and then after that, committee will have questions.
Better? Fantastic. Hi everyone, my name's Katie. I'm a farmer in Saanich, and I'm here on behalf of the South Island Farmers Institute. We are a brand new organization. I can do it just on the screensaver too.
Maybe somebody can click for
Is
her.
it me? It may be operator error.
No, I think it's probably,
You got it. Okay. Can I point at you when I'm ready? I was. Maybe it's too far. That's all right. So we're a brand new organization that finally was established in 2023. We're a fantastic group of food, fiber, and floral producers on South Vancouver Island. We are membership driven, and essentially what ended up happening was I reached out to a bunch of other farmers and I said, hey, I'm recognizing that there might be some gaps here. How can we better support our local food producers? And how could a Farmers Institute in community better support you? So a bunch of folks came together and said, we would like a little bit of support economically. We'd like farmer-on-farmer education, maybe some bulk buying projects. Farmers Institutes also run things like the Salt Spring Island Fall Fair. They'll sometimes do tool sharing networks and things like that as well. But what we heard from our community specifically was that our local producers really wanted education, and they wanted education from their peers. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, this is just a little bit of an idea as to who our producers are. We don't turn anyone away regardless of their size. So we have folks as small as myself on a ½ acre, and we have folks as large as Terry Mitchell, who's on hundreds of acres. So it's a pretty fantastic group of producers. And we also do welcome members of the community who are not producing food as non-voting members. So they still get a regularly monthly email from myself when I can get one out. They're still kept abreast of all the programming that goes on. It's just when it comes to voting specifically, we give that to our food producers specifically, and the community members still do attend our meetings and our AGMs and all that jazz. So you can see we're really diverse. We have a fantastic group of farm hands as well that are a part there, regardless of the management style of the land, organic, conventional, leasing, or landowning. We're all really, really unique, and we all have different challenges and different successes. So the catalyst for this was a little bit of seed money from the Peninsula and Area Agriculture Commission, which I understand Sidney is not a part of. However, PAC really does support a lot of municipal decisions, and so that's really how we are different from PAC, is that we want to support our producers, whereas PAC gently guides municipalities into making decisions for the municipalities. But they also have a portion of their mandate that is educational focused. And so that's what's really helpful, to have the Farmers Institute and PAC just be closely aligned, but not overlapping in what our programs do offer. So in the first 18 months, really what we wanted to do was a whole bunch of education, and we really wanted to support we really wanted to harness the education that is in our own community currently. And so you can see we've had 24 learning events. This is up until February. We've had a couple more since then, but we've really got a lot of energy behind us, so we're pretty excited to be out in community. The Sustainer Series is my personal favorite event that we have in the winter time. What we do is we reach out to those that have been farming in community for decades, some generations, and ask them to come to our meetings and share successes, challenges, and their family history. And we've been finding that it's a really casual, come-as-you-are evening, but it's really unifying too, because there's some things that I'm challenged with that also Mr. Larry Sluggett is challenged with. And there's some things that unite us all together. So we also, as part of that meeting, invite an expert on a local regional concern. And so sometimes we talk about land access, sometimes we talk about geese or taxation, succession planning, and it's really just to help support us in the colder months and also just get us together and seeing more of our comrades indoors. Next slide, please. We also run a summer series where we get to do a whole bunch of field trips to other people's businesses and different farms, and that's really exciting. It's a lot more hands-on, and we really get to interact with our peers one Sunday a month in the growing season, which is a challenge for some of us to get out of the fields, but it's really nice to get to be able to see one another. And then we host the business series, which is really focused on economic success of our producers. And so that is a lot of in-classroom learning. Some of them are done on Zoom. But those are just really great to help us be better record keepers, file our taxes more effectively. We also talk a lot about labor, because that's one of the challenging things that's facing our local food producers that way. Next one, please. And then our biggest one that we host is Farmer to Farmer. And Farmer to Farmer is now a week-long conference that we host on the South Island. We host it at the Saanich Fairgrounds, and we do field trips all around the region. And so what's really exciting about that is it's a week-long affair. And so producers are able to attend one or all of them, and we pop around to different farms during that week, and we're able to really see what other people are doing in the cooler months. They're really focused on hands-on every other day apart from the Thursday. And then the Thursday is the day that we all go to the Saanich Fairgrounds and we do lectures, which is really fantastic as well. We have a lot of wonderful supporters. So the field days are great. They'll cover topics, anything from mechanics to greenhouse work, and then the indoor stuff can be everything from pricing your product to, again, more labor and marketing and things like that. And, oh yes, so here we go. There's a list of some of what the field days can offer. We did a solar panel one, which was really fantastic. You can flop to the next slide. And then inside, it's a really great mix of community members as well, because usually those folks that are our community members, not voting members, come and table. So that's also a really good way for them to interact with our community. So for 2025, we're expanding a little bit of the work that we're doing, but really just building off of the success that we've had in the last 2 years. We're doing a tool share network and bulk purchasing as well. And so I know we're really new in community. We really wanted to come this evening to introduce ourselves to you. We haven't reached out and asked for funding to Sidney yet. We understand there's not a lot of producers here, but there are a lot of eaters. There's a lot of fantastic restaurants here that do support local food producers. And so just introducing ourselves, so then when our applications do come in for requests for funding at some point, you have a little bit of an idea, and also to feel comfortable to come and talk to us if that's something that is indeed of interest to you for discussion. And then one last thought, how else you can support. So there's other things to consider as a municipality. You guys have a lot of power. There's a local procurement policy, so when there's events here, it's really great if local food is celebrated there. Yeah, and just some thoughts to consider while you start to think about your local food producers. And I think that's all. So thank you all. Feel welcome to reach out if you have any questions outside of this meeting. Happy to chat, meet you in the field, or meet you for a coffee at another time. Is there any questions now?
I will look to my fellow committee members first. Okay, I'll get a little list. We'll start with Councillor Duck.
Yes, thank you for your presentation, Ms. Underwood. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Underwood. Just a couple of questions relative to geographic coverage. You mentioned it's the South Island Farmers Institute and the peninsula. What's sort of the geographic boundaries of that, or are there any geographic boundaries?
We don't have any geographic boundaries. We do have a few members in the Comox Valley and in Nanaimo. We just friends of the Farmers Institute sort of thing. We have folks all the way out to Shirley, Jordan River. We also do have a few members that wanted to get the newsletter that live in Delta, so they also joined the Institute just to be a part of the newsletter.
Thank you. And you've mentioned your engagement with the community and local government. Have you taken a position on what the CRD's agricultural initiative is relative to their goal of 10,000 acres, 10,000 hectares under cultivation within the CRD and their development program? So are you reflecting on anything on that in terms of how you want to move forward?
Yeah, so we've been hearing back from our members, and we do collect quite a bit of data on them, and there's a huge need for more land for food production. I know in my very small community, my very small intimate circle, there are people who are looking for land, and as the Farmers Institute, we are very much in support of more public land being used for food production. The way that I look at it personally is if we're growing food on it, it's not being put to a good use.
If I may, Chair, I have a couple more. What's the position of the Institute, or has there a position on relative to property taxes for agricultural land, growing food versus growing or not growing anything? Are they going to take a position on that and sort of support that?
There has been discussion, and we've actually been in talks with the Ministry of Agriculture about perhaps increasing the threshold for that, or reevaluating what that looks like, perhaps opportunities for more audits and just a little bit more transparency to make sure that that does go about more effectively.
Great. And one last question, if I may. In terms of membership, you mentioned, I saw Halliburton Farms on there. Do you see much, is there membership from the community gardeners? There's some at Sandown, there's some in Saanich, there's some in Glencansop Valley. So I'm wondering if you're getting some membership from individuals like that.
We certainly are, yes. We have quite a few members that are a part of the Farmers Institute from Sandown, and all of the Halliburton farmers currently are. The nice thing about being a Farmers Institute member is it's only $25 a year, and so we didn't want to have there be big barriers for people to be a part, and we're finding there are people that have been purchasing memberships as non-food producer people, so they're not selling commercial garden folks who really want to support in a way by giving $25, but also too just having access to higher level education, because there's a lot of services around in community that are giving really good education for beginners, but our education is also a little bit more high level, and we've been finding some really engaged home gardeners that now are starting to think, oh, I could actually be doing this as a vocation.
And what about other organizations such as CR Fair and I can't think of the name of the one that does the land matching? Are they engaged in what the Institute does, and we use them as a resource?
Yeah, so we've had some collaboration. The Young Agrarians is a really fantastic organization, and they are indeed a member, as is CR Fair. So both are non-voting members, but they are made aware of what we are doing. And I'm delighted to say in August we're hosting a collaborative workshop with the Young Agrarians, where we will have a 2-hour workshop about pests, beneficial insects, and pollinators at Halliburton Farm, and then the evening portion will be with young agrarians about land matching. So there's a lot of opportunity to collaborate, and we share information and try very hardly not to overlap our programming. Before we submit our applications to the Ministry of Agriculture, we reach out to Sandown and Halliburton Farm to just make sure that we're not overlapping, requesting too much funding, but our programming is complementary to one another.
Thank you, and congratulations. As someone that's been involved in the agricultural business over the last decade, I look forward to hearing more of the development. I think it's a great idea. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have Councillor O'Keefe next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I'm not too familiar with this world of farming. However, I've heard recently about some of the challenges farmers are having to get access to local markets, like aside from setting up a farm stand, that it's quite difficult to sell your produce to thrifties or save on. It has to get shipped to the mainland first and then sorted out there and come back again, which seems bizarre. So I'm wondering, is that something you're struggling with? Is that something that you're working towards, or with others, to kind of find solutions for that?
Absolutely. So to touch on just finding different markets, one of the things that's really exciting is when we have our workshops and our meetings, we intend for them to be about 2 hours, and we find that people stick around for probably about 4 hours, and there's a lot of conversation and collaboration that happens informally. And so just giving people the space to maybe target those different markets and come up with different strategies themselves is definitely something we're delighted to host. But we have been finding that our members are also considering maybe there could be some sort of institutionalized selling and things like that, or hosting workshops as to how to become GAP certified to be able to go into grocery stores like Thrifties and things like that. The opportunities are absolutely there. It's just a matter of capacity for us now currently, because we are completely volunteer run. And so for me, when a member comes with an idea, really what I'm there for as the president is to nurture that idea and support them the best way we can, and try and find some funding to support that. And if there's people that want to run with it, we are more than happy to support in that way.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Novak, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. Very interesting. I don't know the first thing about farming. So for me, this is all new and very good. I am curious about one thing. Are you involved in any way in the world of beekeeping? Because I have some friends that are beekeepers, and I know that the bee population is at risk, and I know that that could have carry-on effects on your industry. So I'm just curious how you're addressing that, if you are indeed.
Sure. So we do have a few members that are beekeepers. We haven't been hearing too much demand from members in terms of educational aspects that people are wanting in order to host more livestock, such as bees. Me as a producer, I'm definitely well aware that the bee population is really struggling. We do, in the winter, part of our business series is we do focus a little bit on organic production. And so that's something that in organic policy, it does really support not using pesticides, and also to just being kind to the bees and giving them space and things like that. So indirectly, we do support that kind of thing. We just haven't been finding that there's a lot of folks that have been specifically interested in beekeeping.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mayor McNeil-Smith, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. You mentioned 71 farmer members, and it indicates 28 agricultural sector supporters. Did you indicate that those were not just non-farming agricultural?
That's correct. So that could be anyone from like the folks at CR Fair or Young Agrarians, or that could also be home gardeners as well, just that are generally interested. But they're non-voting members specifically. But there are a large group of fantastic nonprofits and charities that are Farmers Institute members.
And how do they differ from your non-voting community partners like PAC and Halliburton?
They're not different.
Okay.
They're just the same. Mm-hmm.
And you've got 4 municipal partners, the more rural of the municipalities, Souk, Metchosin, Central Saanich, and North Saanich. How are they defined as municipal partners?
They've been, we've been able to submit grant applications for grant and aid, and they've been really forthcoming with funding for us to be able to continue to just continue to offer programming. One big surprise for us was insurance. Having to have insurance was more than $0, so that really helps go towards insurance for programming specifically, so we can be on other farms' properties and also run at the Saanich Fairgrounds.
Thank you. Thank you for making us aware, and continued success.
Thank you very much.
Anybody from the rest of the committee? No questions? All right, then I will go ahead, because I, in a galaxy a long time ago, far away, did a degree in agroecology, so I'm very excited.
Cool.
So my first question, I guess, do you have, are any of your partners members of Indigenous nations?
Not specifically that I know of, and that's something that I've been personally, but also too a few of our other members have been working towards building those relationships. I understand it's something that is, it's more different than just walking in and saying, hey, do you want to give us $25? It's a really tender relationship that I'm really excited to continue nurturing moving forward, and would be so delighted if we could have members of our First Nations become a part of the Farmers Institute, as I do acknowledge that the whole structure of what it is to be a Farmers Institute is deeply colonial.
Yeah, it was Central Saanich. I know there was a land purchase a little while ago, and it was a heritage property, and I know the local First Nations had been working with the municipality in maintaining some of the heritage buildings that were from like the settler farmers that were initially there, and I think they were going to be doing restoration and potentially some farming on the property. So I think probably you've got a few opportunities for people who've recently acquired land and might be looking. So hopefully, best of success in your look. The next one is the South Island Prosperity Project. I think one of the first projects they had done was when people were talking about abattoir limitations on the island, and Councillor O'Keefe, talked about produce, but I know that we didn't get one this far north. I think something was kind of being developed in Duncan. Is that something that you're still hearing from a lot of your farmers? Is that abattoir space and trying to get more of that was an issue?
We've been hearing a little bit of that. There is an abattoir in Mill Bay that's been doing a really good job. Tom's been doing a fantastic job there, and he's been coming down to farmer to speak with our members. I believe he is indeed a member himself as well, so he's on my email list, although very busy. So it's definitely still a need in community, because Mill Bay it's a distance. And then there's also a space in Metchosin that is available for some livestock processing as well. It's just they don't have a tremendous amount of capacity as their livestock farmers themselves. So the need is definitely still there. Our members are making do, but we understand there is also always room for improvement.
I had thought at the time when they were talking about that, there was some movement where they were talking to the Ministry of Agriculture about changing classifications in order to basically make more spaces that didn't require the government inspector there all of the time. Is that still something people are talking about, or have recent changes kind of been enough to eke people through for now, and that's kind of fallen off the radar?
It's pretty tricky because currently we don't have a local agrologist. Our regional agrologist is still on leave and has been for about 6 months. It has been something that has been on her plate before, and also something we can bring to the ministry and advocate for change. That is just not one of the hot topics that we've been finding for our region specific. I think because we have such a regional context, there's a lot of smaller scale producers. There's a lot of people who are leasing land and don't have livestock. And so we're finding now that there's less and less people that are actually engaging with livestock production because of that. So less of a demand here. Province-wide, there is still a need, and other FIs are working on that.
Okay, thank you. That's good information. And in terms of, I guess, getting people to markets, have you reached out to, or would it be something that you would be looking at as getting actual like restaurants as participating members so that people could, I guess, maybe form peer-to-peer networks? I know a lot of restaurants do form, networks or relationships with individual farmers, and if there's people who are starting to look at getting in and they need to form those networks, have you been doing outreach to restaurant associations or?
As the Farmers Institute, we have been. So we do have a few local restaurants who are some of our non-voting ag supporters. We do have a few that are Farmers Institute members, and their restaurants are more so just really keen to know the agricultural context. And let me think here now. Sorry, I'm just trying. Sorry, I thought about which restaurants were, but so we're talking about the restaurants. Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, about whether you had restaurants that were members, if you had members who were looking to get into forming relationships with restaurants for their direct access to produce.
Oh yes, so one of the other things we do when we host our Farmer to Farmer conference in January is we invite those restaurants to have lunch with us as well. And so we're really trying to get those owners and those head chefs in the door and just really establishing a more casual relationship or a more informal relationship to build those bonds with our producers. So we're trying. We're giving people the opportunity for those tools, and whether or not they're grabbing at those tools and running with it, it would be a good thing to gather to see who's followed up on that sort of thing. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Those, I think, are all of my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess if that will conclude, nobody has any other questions. Thank you for your presentation, and good luck.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time this evening.
Our next presentation is the Sidney Business Improvement Association. It's their business development report. And our presenter will be Natalie Bobrowicz, the business development manager. I hope I said your last name wrong.
No, you did. Yeah, that was great. Thank you. I'll just figure out the slides here. 1 second. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you for the opportunity to present this update on the first year of the Business Development Partnership between the Sidney BIA and the Town of Sidney. My name is Natalie Bobrowicz, and I serve as the Business Development Manager for the Sidney BIA. This evening, I'll provide a summary of our work over the past year, including key initiatives, business engagement efforts, and the early outcomes that we have been seeing. The first year of this partnership has focused on providing equitable support to all businesses across the areas of Sidney, not just within BIA boundaries. Our work prioritised data collection, direct outreach, and cross-sector engagement to better understand the local business environment and tailor our support accordingly. A key milestone was the release of the inaugural Sidney Business Snapshot Report, which brought together local business insights, economic indicators, and foot traffic data to create a clear, town-wide picture of Sydney's economy. Despite continued global challenges, including inflationary pressures, workforce shortages, and trade policy uncertainty, Sydney's businesses reported steady growth and a strong sense of optimism. That resilience was formally recognised when BC Business Magazine named Sydney the most economically resilient city in British Columbia, which helped affirm the strength of our business community and the efforts being made locally. We were also excited to launch new workforce-focused initiatives and delivered record-breaking events that help connect businesses with job seekers, customers, and one another, laying strong groundwork for the next 2 years of this partnership. Next slide. The approach to the business development role was hands-on and proactive. That included surveys, one-on-one consultations, sector-specific meetings, and networking mixes, all aimed at understanding what businesses need and how we can help. We also established and strengthened strategic partnerships through participation in regional events such as BCEDA, SIP, and VIEA conferences, and others. These connections ensure that Sydney is part of a broader economic conversation and that our businesses have access to external opportunities and insights. Another success of this role has been creating a direct communication link between businesses and the town through quarterly meetings. This allows us to bring forward on-the-ground perspectives to inform decision-making. In addition, we centralize support by becoming a clear point of contact for businesses, offering guidance on evolving issues such as US tariff changes and responding quickly to external pressures. And lastly, we help strengthen the local business network, not just through events, but through peer-to-peer learning and collaboration, helping foster a more connected, resilient business community. I'll just walk through a few of the standout programs from this past year, things that really help connect businesses, support hiring, and respond to what we were hearing on the ground. Next slide, thanks. The Sydney Employment Expo was a key workforce initiative delivered in partnership with Beacon Community Services. The event featured over 30 participating employers, with nearly a third coming from outside the downtown core, which reflects our effort to make this truly town-wide. We had close to 300 job seekers attend, our highest turnout to date for any employment-focused event. Several employers reported making direct hires as a result of their participation, and feedback indicated that the overall quality of candidates was strong. All Sydney businesses were provided free booth space, helping reduce barriers to participation and enabling broader representation. This event also helped promote Sydney as a viable career destination, not just a place to shop or visit. The Work in Sydney Perk Pass was designed as a simple, low-barrier way to support both employee attraction and retention. It offered perks at a range of businesses, including both BIA and non-BIA members, and helped showcase Sydney as a great place to work and to shop. The pass was open to all paid members of any Sydney business, regardless of location, which helped ensure broad accessibility. We saw a strong response, with all 500 available passes claimed in under 2.5 weeks, and 28% of those were from staff working outside of downtown Sydney, showing that the program reached across the whole town. Beyond the perks, it also helped reinforce employer branding by highlighting local lifestyle amenities, and it gave us useful insight into workforce demographics and commuting patterns, data we're ready to use to shape future planning. One of the most important pieces we delivered this year was the first ever Sydney Business Snapshot report. It brought together economic indicators, pedestrian traffic data, and local business insights, offering a more complete picture of the business climate in Sydney. The report also helped identify emerging trends and cross-sector challenges, giving us a stronger foundation for designing responsive programs and services. This snapshot now acts as a baseline, something we'll update each year so we can track change over time and inform strategy with reliable data. It's also a step towards building long-term business intelligence in Sydney. The social media workshop series was developed in direct response to feedback we gathered through our surveys and the business snapshot report. Businesses told us that they wanted practical, in-person training, especially around marketing. So that's exactly what we delivered. The sessions were hands-on and approachable, tailored to small business owners looking to improve their online presence. We saw record attendance, and notably, nearly half of all participants, 49.2%, came from outside the downtown Sydney area, which shows the reach and relevance of the programming. This past year, we personally welcomed 44 non-BIA businesses with orientation materials and follow-up support. We ensured that businesses outside the downtown core had free access to mixers, workshops, and expos, and we saw that in the numbers. 25% of mixer attendees and 29% of expo booths came from beyond the BIA boundary. These businesses were also included in community-wide events like Treat Street and the Sydney Sidewalk Sale through special outreach and coordination. We offered one-on-one consultations on topics like marketing, workforce support, and funding programs, and we sent out monthly business newsletters to keep everybody informed. In terms of broader representation, all Sydney businesses, not just those in the BIA, were included in programs like the Perk Pass and our business surveys, to which 42.2% of all respondents were actually outside the downtown core. We ensured that everybody's voices were heard by representing Sydney at regional and provincial forums such as VIEA, SIP, and BCEDA, and relaying that information back to local business owners. As we move into year 2, we're focused on building on the momentum from the first year and continuing to evolve our approach based on what we've learned. First, we'll continue to deepen engagement with out-of-area businesses through personal visits, tailored resources, and by ensuring they're represented in council updates. We're also preparing to launch our first Business Walks program this spring. By summer, we'll be releasing new marketing and onboarding materials, which will be available on both the Sydney BIA and Town of Sydney websites. These resources will help clarify the services available to all businesses and support smoother onboarding for new owners. The next edition of the Sydney Business Snapshot annual report will include year-over-year comparisons and pedestrian data trends, which will give us better insight into long-term patterns and inform future programming. We also plan to explore sector-specific opportunities, especially around the marine sector and blue economy, working with partners like Coast, ABCMI, and SIP. And finally, we'll continue tracking commercial health indicators such as turnover, vacancies, and retention to help us assess whether a more formal business retention expansion program is needed in future years. Next slide. Before we wrap up, I wanted to share a few reflections we've received from businesses located outside the downtown core in areas like West Sydney and Harbour Road. These quotes speak to the value of being intentionally inclusive. They highlight how outreach, resources, and consistent engagement have helped ensure that businesses across Sydney, not just in the BIA area, feel seen, supported, and part of the community. We want to thank the Mayor, Council, and Town of Sydney staff for your support throughout the first year of this partnership. Your investment has allowed us to extend services beyond the BIA area, engage with businesses across the community, and deliver programs that reflect local needs. We've supported over 960 businesses with practical tools, consistent outreach, and timely information. We appreciate the collaboration and look forward to continuing this work together in year 2. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. I'll turn to the committee and see if there are questions. I'm looking at Councillor O'Keefe first. We'll start with Councillor O'Keefe and then I see Councillor Novak, Councillor Rintoul.
Thanks so much for the presentation, Natalie. Yeah, really nice, a nice looking report. Just a few things, some comments and questions. One thing in the business report that, sorry, I was really happy to see was that you guys are tapping into the ped counters.
Yes.
For the foot traffic. And that's been something that I've been wanting to see for a long time. As people may know, that was something started up, I think, in 2017 with the previous Economic Advisory Committee. David would know about that. And the BIA at the time. And I've always thought that there was a lot of potential there for us to tap into. So, so thank you for doing that. I think that's great. In terms of what I was looking for was some clarity on the PED counts and the number of visitors. And so that the report talked about almost 2 million in foot traffic. And what I was wanting is to check my understanding on how we're arriving at those amounts. And are we making a distinction between pedestrian traffic and visitors? And so the reason I'm asking is because, as you know, we've got PED counters in several locations around the town.
Yeah.
And my recollection, going back to 2018, is that when they first brought out the PED counters, they acknowledged that it was a good general tool for measuring pedestrian traffic. But you had to be careful how we used it, because, so for example, you could have a visitor come to Sidney and they might be down at Beacon Park, so they would get counted there. And then they would walk up the street and go to Tanner's and go in and out and get counted a couple times. And then they might go past another location and get counted again. Also the example of somebody who's staying at one of our local hotels for a few days, one visitor to the town, but walking around the town, and so that person could get counted 10 times. And so at the time, there was acknowledgement of that. And so they were trying to come up with a way of how can we interpret that data so that it's accurate. So I don't know if you've had any opportunity to kind of to look at that further, or that's kind of still on the to-do list.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that I'm sure can be expanded into how we can track patterns of people moving around town. For the purpose of the report, we just measured from one station, which was actually the PED counter outside of Tanner's bookshop. So, you know, instead of saying, okay, they're crossing through this pedestrian counter to another, it's in one location. You know, we can't negate the fact that someone could be walking back twice, but where it becomes really useful is where we can at least compare year over year. So we have the data from all these years, so we can, you know, say at least, you know, there was way more footsteps. So we've seen that, you know, pedestrian traffic declined, of course, through COVID, and then we were able to track that, okay, now we're back to like 2019. We've gotten higher pedestrian traffic since 2019 now, so we're recovered from COVID and we're growing. So that's where it's useful. You know, we do have to be careful and we can't be super exact with the numbers, but it does show trends and patterns.
Yeah, okay. Maybe if you could, maybe I'll talk to you offline about it, but just when I pull a PED count for 2024, and so what I come up with is, it comes up with Tanner's was, I think, 872,000, and then there's Beacon, and then there's Beacon Park, and it comes up to 1.9. So that made me think that, oh, we must have added them all together. But maybe I'm misunderstanding
It's
how.
just from one location, the data
Okay.
in the report,
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
from one specific PED
So
counter.
sticking with the PED counts, the other thing that had been discussed in the past was this could be a good tool for businesses or potential businesses to look at if information was gathered at specific locations and published in some way, so that somebody who was looking to establish a business in Sidney, they could get an idea what the traffic is like at 4th and Beacon, or what it's like up at Resthaven and Beacon, as opposed to the foot of Beacon or on Bevan. So just a suggestion, something. I know you guys are just getting into it now, so
Yeah, no,
I just,
interesting thoughts. Thank you.
I'll toss tossed it out there. The other, in regards to, so I really like all the information you had in terms of the economic performance indicators, talking about business attraction and growth, et cetera. And and I know this is just the first report, so just some things that I would be interested in seeing, maybe for next time, is that there was a good information there in terms of the tourism sector and how they've been doing. And so what would be nice to see is if there was a way that we could gather info about the different geographical areas, so like the West Side and Harbor Road, one aspect, and then also the aspect of different sectors. Because when we look at a report that says overall this is how things are going in Sydney, that's got, there's benefit to that, of course. But then if we're going to be looking at a strategy for business retention and expansion, it's helpful to know like what businesses are doing well, what are not doing so well, and what are some of the supports we might be able to give them. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I looked at that I like that you did, you were looking at the commercial vacancy rates, which is a good thing to do. And so just as an example, so if we had information on vacancy rates, say on the West Side, that also helps us in terms of land use planning. So for example, a few months ago, we had a discussion when we were looking at the new land use plan for the airport. And we were looking at certain parcels of land and whether they should be zoned industrial or whether they should be like commercial retail. And so at the time, all we really had to go was anecdotal information about, I've heard just, generally that there's a need for more industrial land to support those sort of businesses. So what would be really cool is if you guys were doing that sort of analysis, then that gives us real data that can help us make decisions on those things. So.
Great, thank you.
And just kind of related to that stuff, I recall, might have been your predecessor who was looking at one of the ways to kind of gather some of this data would be to have some kind of database, and it would include where they were geographically located, what sector they were in. And we
Chair, a point of order, please.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps if you want to have a further discussion about these metrics, I know they did come up when we were doing the economic development about what kind about these kind of land metrics and very specific business ones, but I think when that was kind of scoped out, we could, we don't need, since it's not in their mandate right now and they're not reporting out on that.
Okay.
If you want to follow up, maybe another time.
I was just using that as an example of, in terms of the report, and that you're talking about establishing a baseline for metrics for future reporting.
Chair, if a point of order, if I could have my point of order acknowledged that I could speak.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the interest and the questions, but more so there are recommendations to the BIA. Committee and council is a policy-making body. We've provided a grant for 3 years. We've asked for the reporting out of that. I find, to use a term, that this is micromanaging, giving direction, purporting to give direction to the BIA in terms of how they should conduct their affairs. They're an arm's length organization. We've shown our support as a council for their efforts, and I'll leave my point there.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe, if you have another question for the presenters?
No, I'll leave it at that. It's normal when we have presentations, whether it's from the Shaw Centre or the museum, to provide feedback. It's not direction. It's just, here's some things I think would be useful. It's not meant to provide direction, so I hope it's accepted in that spirit. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Novak, I believe you had questions, and I had you next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, ladies, for your presentation. I think it's I think you guys are doing a great job, and I really appreciate what you're doing for the town. I have only 2 questions. One of them has to do with visitors to the town. I know we touched upon it briefly, and I know we can calculate number of visitors coming into town through hotel nights, etc. But is there any way that we can track visitors coming to the town on either on a day basis or through marinas or through other transportation modes, whether they're in town for 1 day or multiple days, Airbnbs, that sort of thing? Do we have the ability to track this, and if so, are we going to track it?
Yeah, I'll actually ask Morgan to speak to that. She does a lot of the tourism figures, and so she will probably have a better, clearer answer for you there.
Thanks, Natalie. Morgan Shaw, Executive Director of the Sidney BIA. So we collect those metrics through Sidney Visitor Services, and we do that on behalf of Destination British Columbia. They're quite extensive, so when we're in a touch point with visitors, either coming through the information center or we've got our programming down at the waterfront through the summer, we collect those metrics. I see your point in relation to the marinas, and I think that that's something to explore, especially as we get going into the next part of the year with tourism season. So I appreciate pointing that out. We also do pull metrics from the hotels as well, but yeah, it's great to be able to build that baseline and sort of see where we're going.
Thanks. Yeah, I know. I think that's really useful information. I think it would also help to inform the BIA on either marketing or other initiatives to particularly target different demographics. As you obviously, you can target local people, you can target visitors, et cetera, and so I think seeing some of those numbers in your report would be very helpful to us to know just what the reach is of your organization and your initiatives. So thank you. Maybe we'll see more of that in the future. And the second thing I wanted to say simply was to compliment you on that Sidney Perk Pass. I think it's a brilliant idea. I'd like to see more of it. I'm curious as to how many of those you gave away in this. I guess this is the first year that the initiative came up.
Yeah, we had an initial run of 500, and as I mentioned in the presentation, they were wildly popular. So they were all claimed within 2.5 weeks, and we had lots of requests for more. So that's something we'll look into, budgetary-wise, if we can repeat that again next year. Yeah.
So, yeah, repeat next year. That would be great, and perhaps larger numbers. Mm-hmm. Question, is there an opportunity perhaps to maybe take that perk ticket to the next level and perhaps sell them, either locally or to tourists, etc.? Is that something you've thought of?
We haven't explored that yet, but it definitely warrants some thought and some brainstorming around that to see how that could be developed, for sure.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rintoul, did you have?
Thank you, Chair. I do. Thank you for the presentation. Really like the annual snapshot report. Easy to digest, lots of information in there. So thank you for that. I think it's a positive tool and resource for all of us on council and within the community. Great to see 2024 numbers. So many business openings and significantly up over the previous year. And I think just kind of with that in mind, what have you seen in the first quarter of this year? Does that trend look like it's continuing? Is it my imagination, or has there been kind of musical chairs of businesses on Beacon? I've seen a lot of movement. Cameron Rose comes to mind, Janet's Teas, just a number of businesses that are well established that have relocated. So is that a new trend, or have I been oblivious to it in the past? Just get your comments on that, please.
I think we go through periods of time like that where everyone will stay in one spot for quite a while, and then everybody will move along the road. It's really good to see in terms of all of these businesses are moving onto bigger locations, which just indicates the growth that they're seeing, and that, you know, they're expanding and growing and being really well supported by the local community. So we can only say that that's a really positive thing. It just keeps us busy updating all of our information. But yeah, it's great to see.
Good to hear. In terms of your points of contact, is it typically with the new business coming into the community looking for insight, or do you get some contact from existing landlords perhaps looking to place a tenant in terms of their suitability or their viability, for their business type within the community? I'm wondering how engaged landlords are with the SBIA.
Yeah, we don't see a lot of contact directly from landlords. We reach out to new business owners. That's triggered by we receive new applications for business licenses that have been approved, and so then we reach out to them as their first contact and follow up from there. So there's not really any landlords engaged in that process.
Okay, thank you. So I think down the road, I think we've seen some turnover in landlords and ownership premises on Beacon as well, so that might be an interesting opportunity for the BIA to get to know some of those new players in town and what they project may happen with their properties. Thanks so much for the report, much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Bowrovich and Ms. Shaw, for your presentation and for the work you do. Just a few questions, just touching on what Councillor Novak said about the Perks Pass. And to Councillor Rinto, I believe the BA refers to that as the Sidney Shuffle. So with regards to that, so it's quite popular, obviously, in such a short time to go through so many. So sort of building on the question, is there a thought to maybe having an increased amount of passes in perhaps next year or some year going forward?
Yeah, I think we would definitely look to add additional passes. Budgetary-wise, we just have to do the numbers and see how many that we can provide in terms of cost to the BIA. But yeah, we would definitely like to run that program again and more widely spread.
I agree. I think it was a really great idea. I'm looking at page 8 of the snapshot, and I think the snapshot is. I saw it a lot earlier in a nice shiny package, so it was great. I'm looking at the primary customer base, and it just shows. I mean, we saw this during the pandemic, how our local community supports our businesses. 65% is just amazing. Through your survey, it may not be hard to get this information, but from speaking through your businesses and showing online at 7.5%, do they anticipate that will increase going forward in the future for their business? I guess it depends on the business you have, but
not directly through the survey responses, but just seeing the amount of interest that businesses are having in taking business online, having online marketplaces. There's been a lot of interest in that. So I think people are trying to offer a hybrid. So people, obviously local shoppers can come into the storefront, but they also can capitalize on online markets as well.
Great. And one last question, if I may. Looking on page 12 with the business challenges and the staffing issues, so noting that the different levels of problems that local businesses are having with staffing, a limited candidate pool, and transportation limits to Sidney. So is this sort of still falling under our housing capacity issues in our community, that's attraction or retention is an issue based on that?
Yeah, I believe so. There were several comments in our surveys that they found that, the limited candidate pool was due to housing. Similarly, when we collected data through the Perk Pass, we saw that the vast majority of employees that collected the pass were local and could walk to work or had a short drive to work, and that perhaps could suggest that, lack of transportation and housing was limiting people from traveling from further afield into Sidney.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Duck, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms. Bobrovich, for your presentation. As was mentioned in public participation, this is a great start, and I think the baseline that's established both in the past year and carrying forward some of the other numbers will be a good measure to see how those change over the next 2 years of your operations. A couple of questions, and it was mentioned by my colleagues in the Sidney Shuffle, and also I think, if I remember correctly, there's about 71 businesses also left Sidney. Is there any analysis of that? Do you do any exit interviews, both with those moving location, and I know some of those were bigger spaces, but I also know some of those were a result of increased leasing costs and having to look for different spaces. Are you collecting that kind of information, why businesses are leaving Sidney, as well as why people are moving, because that would be a valuable piece of data as well?
Yeah, I mean, not every business that closes, as you know, not everybody reports that or, gives the opportunity for outreach on that. We did see quite a few retirements last year. We saw some mergers, and then we did see quite a few home businesses close, which could just be a result of people who had businesses during COVID and now they're back to work, that kind of thing. So we anecdotally collect data. We, when we get the closed applications for business licenses, we can see if they've moved out of area, that type of thing. There wasn't any huge trend in what we saw last year that points to people being forced out due to rental costs, that kind of thing. But it's something that we definitely monitor.
So going forward, you'll be measuring those, whether it's anecdotally or quantifiable, you'll be measuring those kind of business changes as on exit or moves, right?
Yes, okay. Absolutely, yeah.
Another piece of information that was gathered by the Economic Development Commission was the gap analysis data. Are you going to be updating that gap analysis and using that information to measure against the business development in Sidney as well?
We haven't currently got plans to do that, but it could definitely be something that we look into over the next 2 years of this partnership. We're not seeing a lot of vacant spots in Sidney. In fact, we have a very short and small commercial vacancy rate. If it was larger, perhaps a gap analysis would be more forthcoming. But it's something that we'll, again, monitor and see, how that can fit in with the programming.
Yeah, I would think there was a lot of work done on that by the EDC, and I think that's some valuable information that as another baseline measure that could be monitored over the next couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you.
Again, thank you for your presentation and work, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mayor McNeil Smith is the only person who I have not had ask a question yet. Did you have anything to ask? Sure. Okay, I believe Councillor Gurnett asked questions about the primary customer base, and I thought that was I was really happy to see that our businesses were so served the local market so well, and tourist was only 11%, and I believe that would have been highlighted because we know with tariffs and things like that is something that could have made us a lot more vulnerable, I thought, than we appear to be, and that's probably heavily weighted towards the hotels being primarily tourists and others. But so I was wondering, do you have a sense, or do you ever collect information on how many businesses rely on staffing for temporary workers or people with work permits? Because I know that was something that was also changed by the federal government. So between like travel restrictions, tariffs, and changes in work permits, I could see there being kind of hidden forces that could be affecting that, but I don't know what percentage of our businesses really need to rely on that worker base. Do you know?
I don't know exact figures. It didn't come up in our survey. We went into detail about people who were experiencing labour shortages and what the reasons behind that might be. And that didn't come up in any comments or, in the survey. Not to say that there's not a few people experiencing that, but it wasn't something that was brought up by anybody in the survey.
Okay. And you've had it come up in the survey before that staffing and having people getting to work is a problem. And I know seeing ads for people looking for restaurant workers, like must have reliable transportation, comes up a lot, because a major problem is that people are like, and then my bus was full, or my bus didn't come, or it takes 2 hours, usually, I think, on average, for people to bus in. Have you thought about doing like a survey to see what businesses are truly reliant on that bus service? And because we just had our last meeting talking about that bus service, and I think that's a big thing, and we don't hear from those people because they have a 2-hour commute either way and they live outside of Sidney. But that is something that the businesses could perhaps bring forward, and is that something you've heard?
It's not something that we've collected data on, but we certainly could going forward for sure. Yeah.
That might be really helpful over the next 2 years to get that bus service to really help the businesses. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think Morgan would just like
go
to
ahead.
add to that.
Sorry. I can only stay silent for so long. A big part of the reason that we developed the perk pass and implemented it, was, of course, it was very nice for staff in Sidney to receive a perk and a perk pass. But what we were really trying to do is ascertain information about the people working in Sidney. So we were asking questions, which I believe was talked about in the business report, that had to do with how are they getting to work. Again, identifying, and it was a surprise to me that so many people are coming from within the local area. So they're walking to work, they're taking their bicycle or driving into Sidney from North Saanich, Central Saanich, and the Sidney municipality. So that was interesting. I think when it comes to identifying issues with transport services or busing into Sidney, that's something that we could delve a bit deeper into, especially with some of the businesses in Westside and the Marine. I think a lot of businesses within the downtown area employ part-time employees or people that are working, a few days a week, where they may be partly retired, etc. So it would be interesting to delve a bit deeper into that, but yeah.
Yeah, and then that was something I thought about. I know a lot of my coworkers got the perk passes. They don't live in Sidney, but they commute in, and they liked it. But when you realize, if you're a restaurant worker who has like an 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. shift, and it took you 2 hours either way, there's no way you were ever going to be stopping in Sidney for business. And so we just kind of end up missing the people who had that, and so we needed some way to actually assess out what that hidden group might be, because if the businesses are saying they have this limitation, and when we do studies for our climate change plans, and we find that like 60% of people are commuting up the peninsula to work, but then when we do a perk pass thing, we find, wow, it's overwhelmingly people who walk in. We're clearly getting two different groups, and we have to figure out how to actually capture the groups that we're missing. And I'm thinking a lot of the back of house workers and things like that, we'd like to be able to catch. But
I think it's a definite barrier when it comes to the workforce in Sidney, because quite frankly, as a service worker, why would you be driving or commuting 30 minutes to an hour by bus or more to Sidney to work for the same amount as you would in Victoria or Langford? Like, you're sticking closer to home from what we see generally. Just to touch on your question with foreign workers, that was definitely something that came up or has come up in our board meetings a little bit more internally with BIA members downtown, and specifically like restaurants, etc., who have gone through the foreign worker program and now are not able to execute on it in the same way. So that's an impact. But I think from the perk pass specifically, what we've identified and how we bring that forward to the business community is that we do need to be competitive in getting workforce. If we're wanting it to come from Victoria, how are we being competitive? Are we paying more? Is there what's the benefit to coming to Sidney to work? And I mean, that's across the board, tourism, visitors, everything in Sidney. We want people to be coming out. So how do we make that as beneficial as possible to everyone?
Thank
Sorry,
you.
Natalie.
No, it's perfect. Yeah, thank you. So, a follow-up question from Councillor O'Keefe.
Yeah, thank you. One of my colleagues twigged me, so thinking about customer demographics, who our customers are, and the tariffs situation as well. And so I'm wondering if you have a sense of, it seems like maybe in downtown, this whole situation might end up being a good thing with people wanting to travel within Canada, and so maybe there's going to be a boom in tourism or whatever, I would think. And I'm wondering if you have any sense yet of, that's good for downtown, how might it impact like the other industries and across the other side, if we've had a chance to look at that yet, about tariffs and
Yeah, so when the threat of tariffs were first announced, we did send out a more informal survey to all of our members, just how do you anticipate being impacted? Is this something that really concerns you? And it was very early on in the tariffs, and we got a mixed bag of responses. People didn't seem, too alarmed. But since then, obviously, things have evolved. We've just started working with the Saanich Peninsula, sorry, it's such a mouthful, Saanich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce Trade Committee. So that's bringing together, there's representatives from like the industrial manufacturing organizations, there's SIP involved. So I think we just had the first meeting a few weeks ago, and I think that's going to be extremely valuable for us to be on this committee learning about the different sectors that will be attending in these meetings and how that's impacting in different ways. So we're kind of on the path to delving into that more.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Seeing no further follow-up questions, I think I'll thank you for your presentation and for your time for your report.
Thank you.
And keep up the good work. Thanks. And with that, we'll conclude our presentations, and we have no development applications. We'll move on to staff reports and hear a staff presentation from the residential parking permit pilot program. Look to Ms. Clary.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Exploring a residential parking permit program was a recommendation from the 2022 downtown parking study. The recommendation included the following steps: develop a parking policy, determine the area in which the permit parking would be in place, and determine when the program would be in effect. This report reviews all three of these steps. A draft policy to guide staff decision-making around on-street parking regulation is attached to this report. This policy is currently just a proposed policy in draft form, so it's open to feedback from council if there's anything that twigs you and that you'd like to see changed at this time. The policy is broken into 4 different sections. The first section is goals, which are largely from the town's OCP and other guiding documents that have been developed. The next section is regulatory tools that are available for staff to use. So at this time, the only regulatory tool is really time-limited parking, with the option of providing residential exemption to that. That's the only proposed. I want to clarify, this is all proposed at this time. It's open to council's direction. So that would be, if there was an area that had time-limited parking restrictions, we could allow residents on that block to have an exemption to park longer than, like, let's say a 3-hour parking time limit. In the future, if council did want to expand it, or even now, if there was a desire to do it, we could add other tools such as like on-street pay parking or residential only parking. We're just not seeing a need for that at this time, but that's always an option to add it into the policy. The third area is the criteria. So I'll start with actually 3.2, which is the time-limited parking. That's something that we already have in our downtown. We have a small section of it in the industrial side, the west side. And so this lays out areas that would be time-limited parking would be allowed. So at this time, we're talking about any industrial area, marine areas, commercial areas, within 300 meters of the downtown Sidney, where we find a lot of people parking, perhaps employees who have chosen not to use the employee parking lot and instead park on residential streets. Around major trip generators such as schools, civic buildings, libraries, tourist attractions. So many of those are already located in one of the other areas described, but if there's something outside of those areas, we could consider time-limited parking. And also if there's any other high-density mixed-use buildings. And for this, I'm thinking more when the West Side local area plan starts to develop, those would be those high-density mixed-use buildings, which aren't currently in an industrial, like they're not actually zoned as industrial at this time. And then, so just as a bit of background, this policy, we don't have an existing on-street parking policy, so that's kind of the foundational things that we already we're doing at a staff level, but it just solidifies it for staff to guide us in those decisions moving forward. The new element is the residential exempt portion of the policy. So that would allow areas with over, again, as drafted, over 75% occupancy from a parking study. So we would use our most recent downtown parking study to inform that parking utilization. The proposal is that over 2/3 of the residents living on the street would require support. So there may be some areas where there's ample off-street parking and residents in the area never really need to use the on-street, or they just don't have issues finding on-street parking when it's needed. So we would send a letter to everyone on the street, and if over 2/3 said yes, we would like, or 2/3 of the respondents said yes, we would like this on-street parking regulation, we would put it in place. And if not, if there just wasn't a need in respondents, or people responded and said no, don't change how it is now, we would just move on to the next area where there might be a need for this. And so this would only be applicable in areas outside of commercial, industrial, or marine areas, but then ones that also have time restrictions available. So really, for this, the way this is drafted, we're looking at most likely it would be within 300 meters of the downtown, because we're not proposing to put residential exempt parking within commercial areas where we want to see higher vehicle turnover, and we don't want residents parking on the streets, or industrial areas or marine areas. So really, the primary area we're looking at right now is within 300 meters of the downtown, the way this policy is written. And then the last section, section 4, talks a little bit about how parking permits would be allowed. At this point, we're proposing up to 1 pass per resident per household. They could be used for the person's own vehicle or visitors. We would require them to renew it every year, and we're thinking it would be about a $50 annual fee. That would have to be something that we'd have to add to our miscellaneous fees bylaw. So you could provide feedback on that at that time when that bylaw would be reviewed. But that would be our kind of starting point. Council could provide more input later. So the way this policy is envisioned for the residential exemption is really to operate similar to our downtown parking lots. At this time, they have 3-hour parking restrictions, but if someone is to buy a pass for those parking lots, they're allowed to park outside of those 3-hour restrictions. So there's business owners or employees who work downtown, they have purchased a pass, and they can park all day in our downtown parking lots as it stands right now. So we're looking at a program similar to how our parking lots already operate in the downtown. Moving on, for geographic area, we're looking at the areas that were already identified in the downtown parking study. So at this time, we're planning on doing a pilot, or proposing to do a pilot on 3rd Street, north of Sidney Avenue. We've received complaints about that area over the years, and it has 100% occupancy in the downtown parking study, so it's a good pilot project. If it were to be successful, we would move on to other areas that were identified with high parking usage in the downtown parking study. If the policy is adopted as written, staff would just proceed with that after 6 to 12 months of the pilot program. We would just start expanding it based on demand. So that's really what this is proposing. And then the last portion of the last step that was recommended in Watt's study was to look at the time frame for the exemptions. We're proposing that the time exemptions, the new time exemptions in these areas just match the existing downtown time exemptions, which are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So that would really deal with like the busiest commerce period, and then when residents or if someone was coming after that time, they could park there for an unlimited time. For engagement, we are proposing to deal directly with or engage directly with the impacted residents, so they would all receive letters, and then teach people who are parking in those areas by actually installing signage, the 3-hour time limit signage when it comes into effect. We would put a Q&A section on the town's website to inform others about this new pilot program, and as we build on it, we would allow an opportunity for residents to apply to potentially have their street become a residential exemption area as well. So there are 2 resolutions. One of them is to endorse this pilot program to start moving forward with it. And the second one is to provide guidance to staff to bring forward the policy to a future council meeting for adoption. If council is happy with how the policy is currently written, that could come next week to council next week for adoption, or if there are significant changes, it could come at a later date. And that is all I'm going to share at this time, but if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Clary. We'll look to committee. I see Councillor Garnett. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. Thank you for the report, Ms. Clary. Just looking at you mentioned 3rd Street as the pilot, and then mentioning the 67% threshold. So if that neighborhood, given you've had complaints, I'd be surprised, but given that it didn't meet that threshold, and you mentioned go on to the next one that's over 75%, would you be envisioning that would be the 1st Street from Oakfield to Ocean?
Yes, that was the vision, yeah.
Okay, and just one follow-up question, if I may. Given that this is a significant change to these areas based on the fact that it's been that way forever, if we were to adopt something like this, would we be possibly thinking about a grace period? I know you're talking about mail-outs and signage, but people are so used to something for so many decades. I just wonder if we should, I don't know how we would approach it even, but it is a significant enough change that people may not even look at the signs because they just get in their car, park, and just walk away, right? So.
Through to Councillor Garnett, we can definitely do like a warning system at first. We've done that with Robbins and a couple other areas as well when there have been changes, so they could provide warnings for the first couple weeks and then they can move into ticketing after that.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Anyone else? Councillor Duck, go ahead. Councillor Novak after.
Thank you, Ms. Clary, for the presentation. A couple of queries. I mean, I love the idea of the 3rd Street being a trial one because I think most of the residents along that stretch between Sidney and Henry are multifamily and have off-street parking, so it'd be a good way to check that. I'm assuming there'll be some sort of residential address identification when people want to register for that exemption. So, you know, you're not going to get people from 3rd Street east or south of Sidney versus, you know, and that kind of thing, correct?
That's correct, yeah. It would be people living outside of the downtown core who would be eligible for this, and yes, we would check their addresses.
There was a late entry communication correspondence indicating the program development. I'm pretty confident that staff didn't just invent a new wheel here, that you took a look at all the programs that are available and put together the best one for Sidney, correct?
Correct. We did look at several different options. I did take a look at Calgary's after seeing that letter come in. It's much more complicated than this actually. It has many more different zones. Sydney's very small and compact, but definitely there's room for modification if council felt the need. But we did look at several other jurisdictions.
No, thank you. I think the trial looks very good, and the structure around it looks well done. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Novak, I had you next, and then Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Ms. Clary, for this, through you to staff. Thank you for the report. It's certainly a great starting point. I have a couple of questions. I'm a little concerned about the 300-meter radius, especially since Sidney is not symmetrical. And, you know, 300 meters to the west is not the same as 300 meters to the east, and 300 meters to the north is not the same as 300 meters to the south. And so I'm just wondering if it would make more sense to consider a more targeted approach and you know, rather than just say 300 meters, because, you know, there might be a property or it might be a street that is right at the edge of that 300 meters and you really need that program up there, but it's beyond the 300 meters. Whereas if you go in the other direction, say south of the commercial area, it's encompassing areas that don't need it at all. So, yeah, I have difficulty supporting the plan when it's kind of vague and untargeted. I'd like to see a little more targeting. recognizing nonetheless that it's still a pilot, and there is, I assume, some flexibility somewhere along the line. But, you know, I always worry about this idea of a minimum becoming a maximum. So have you given thought to, say, another approach to dealing with the areas that would be covered by this rather than just a straight 300-meter radius?
Through to Councillor Novak, we did talk about this briefly, and we would extend to kind of the end of the block if a block was halfway through 300 meters, let's say. But we feel like it'll be sufficient. It would capture some of the west side if the 300 meters were to be measured that way. But if council did have, like, if council would rather have like up to 3 blocks or up to 4 blocks, then that's definitely something we could consider. The one challenge is we don't want it to extend for the whole town because it's not close to those high trip generators. Like the commercial zone, downtown commercial is where you get the most people coming and going, and you know, when the downtown parking lots are full, this space could be used in a very similar way. People can be shopping there and go to the downtown, walk into Sidney, walk into the more commercial district. So again, the intent of this program as it's written is to focus in an area around the downtown, but if council did want to provide direction on like the number of blocks or some other guidance, we thought 300 meters was a good rule of thumb, but we're open to adjusting it.
Mr. Edwards, you may add.
Thank you, Chair. Just adding on to that response, council can always make exceptions as well, and this would essentially be a policy, not a bylaw. And so there is the opportunity for flexibility if an area warranted it. One of the things that we really want to keep in mind is that while we aim for it to be revenue neutral, it's hard to determine just how achievable that will be. So we want to be careful about extending such a service to neighborhoods where it wouldn't necessarily be warranted.
And that, thank you, Mr. Edwards, and thank you, Chair. And that kind of goes to my next question. If this were passed as written tonight, is there a plan in place, or do you have, again, through Chair to staff, do you have a starting point of where this policy would be applied tomorrow, let's say? Would you bring back to council a map and say, okay, we're going to put time-limited parking here, residential exceptions here, et cetera, et cetera? Is that the next step, for example?
Through Councillor Novak, no, the next step would, if this is approved tonight, we would go and we would send a mail out to the impacted residents. Again, the proposed pilot area would be 3rd Street, north of Bevan Avenue. So that would be our next step, would be to actually get in contact with the residents in that area, find out if they would like this residential exempt parking program. If they would, we would go and start installing signage and roll out the parking passes similar to how we already roll out passes for the downtown parking lots. So the intent of getting this into a policy and this policy directing staff is so that we're not coming back to council every time we want to add another area. But that could change if council does want ultimate say over which areas get residential parking every step of the way. That's always an option. But it's really to simplify it and allow it to roll out more seamlessly than coming back to council each time.
Okay. So next steps is the test area on 3rd Street, and depending on how that plays out, you'll expand it to other areas on I don't know how you would decide where, would you solicit this information the way you're planning on doing it to 3rd Street? Would you send out mailings to affected residents and say, would you like this in your area? Is that the plan?
That is the plan. We would use areas from our downtown parking study that had over 75% occupancy already measured. So we already have that data collected. So yes, we would start with 3rd Street, and if it was, we would wait for 6 to 12 months, make sure it was working okay. And if it was, we would then, the proposal is to roll it out to 1st Street, would be the next area, and we would continue to hit up the blocks that had the over 75% occupancy. And then the next parking study will come, and we will look to see if there's other areas that may benefit from this sort of program.
Okay, thank you. One other question, well, maybe I have 2 more perhaps. I have a little bit of concern with item 4 in the policy, and that is the limit of 1 parking permit per residential address. The reason I have some concerns is that we're building a lot of townhomes, condos, etc., in especially now with the new requirements, or rather the new legislation that allows higher density in certain areas. It of necessity limits the amount of off-street parking that will be available for some of these new developments. My concern is you have a family of 2 people that may have 2 vehicles. There may be an older child or relative living in that same 2 or 3 bedroom unit with them. So I don't think it would be uncommon, let's say, for a residential unit to have 2 or more cars. And so my concern is that limiting it to 1 would place these people at a disadvantage. Has there been some thought given to that?
Through to Councillor Novak, we did consider doing more per resident, but again, it's hard to know how it's going to roll out, and we didn't want people abusing it right off the bat, getting 2 and then giving 1 to their friend, and that's not the intent of the program. So we decided to start with 1 and see how it goes, and if there's a need for more, we could always do more. But people who do have legal secondary suites or townhouses, like each of those does have its own unit address, so they should be able to get 1 per unit, like per residential address, as long as there's an A or B, or it has its own defining address. So, and yeah, I guess part of living in a downtown dense neighborhood is that you don't have available parking. Anyone who's lived in any area denser than Sidney knows that sometimes you have to park a block away because there's just no parking around you. So people in that situation, if there are like teenage children who have their own cars, they may just have to park down the road. Or those people may also vote against this program and then mean that it just won't happen on the street because it's not something that's needed and not something that the neighbors or the residents would like.
Mr. Edwards, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And just adding on to that too, and part of the policy criteria too is that it is limited to the downtown to areas that have very high occupancy of parking, and the idea is to try to encourage more turnover in parking while still allowing some residential on-street parking. But the goal is to ensure that the downtown parking area doesn't get entirely consumed for long durations that are non-residents, and to try to encourage the availability of parking for other uses.
So I guess at the end of the day, the type of resident that I was referring to before would still be able to park overnight because the time limitation would be Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. I guess the only time that might be an issue is if somebody's going on holiday or something and needs to leave their car. Right now, it's not a problem unless there's a complaint. My last question is, and again, I don't want to, at the risk of poking this, but was the All Bay parking area or concerns that manifested earlier this year, was that area considered in this parking plan?
Through to Councillor Novak, the intent of this is to provide on-street parking for residents who don't have sufficient off-street parking. In All Bay, we heard very clearly that off-street parking wasn't a challenge. Most residents there have sufficient off-street parking and don't need on-street parking. From what we heard, the challenge wasn't that residents didn't have a spot on street, where this program is specifically that for smaller lots where there's less parking available off-street for residents.
Okay, and is All Bay within that 300-meter radius?
No, it's not.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, I lost my list. Councillor O'Keefe, I had you next on the list.
Thanks. So the report talks about this is likely to continue to be an issue. Residents who live downtown that don't have parking, and it's likely going to get worse. Any thoughts given to how this is going to impact neighboring areas? So those people that are currently parking in these places, they're not going to stop driving or bringing their cars to Sidney. So what kind of, I'm just wondering, are we just pushing that problem into another neighborhood? Any concern about that?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, that may happen. The hope is that employees, for example, park up at the employee parking lot, which does not have high usage at this time. And as far as residents who live in the downtown, every unit except for there's a few variants that have been given, but every unit should have a parking space, and residents need to be looking at available parking before they move to Sidney, really. We have heard that a lot, where people move here with 2 cars and they only have 1 parking space, and they say, where do I put my other car? And it's, people need to take some ownership of that, and if people are, having to park far enough away, maybe they'll choose to give up their second car or sell it, and then they're walking more, using transit more, or biking more, or using the car share more. So I hear you, it is a challenge, but people do have to modify their life based on where they live.
Yeah, and I thank you. And I guess to that point, people who move downtown, they know that they moved into a building that has 1 spot. And so, as you say, they should know that that's the case. So, yeah, any concern that what we're really doing is moving the cost of parking off of the developer's plate onto the taxpayers of Sidney to be providing parking that should be provided. Is that something that factors in at all?
So downtown, or Sidney's bylaw does have a minimum parking requirement that developers are required to provide unless council provides a variance to that. Right. So as long as developers are meeting that requirement, then no. The thing is that Sidney does have these big right-of-ways that could be used for many different things, but at this time they're currently being used for parking, and it makes sense to allow residents to use it in this way if residents are having challenges finding parking, if they have limited off-street parking. So, it's true that we are providing this huge benefit to the community by keeping that as parking and maintaining that as parking, and in the long run, that may not always be the case. We may have other priorities and use that space for other things other than parking. But at this time, it's there, and it makes sense to allow residents to use it in that way.
Right. Another question through you, Chair. So we're trying to model it similar to our parking lots. What is the fee that people pay in the parking lots? Is that like a monthly fee or an annual fee? How does that work?
It is a monthly fee, and I may turn to Mr. Hissick if he knows the dollar value offhand.
believe it's currently $60 a month, and it is available on an annual basis too.
Okay. So I guess my question is, my understanding is that we would offer residents only permit for $50 a year. And so I'm also thinking about Mr. Edwards' comments about we would like this to be as revenue neutral as possible. There's obviously going to have to be some enforcement. So had any thought been given to upping that $50 annual fee to something a little bit more, to be more in line with not necessarily the full amount in a parking lot, but a little more in line with what others are paying for that kind of thing?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, that's definitely something we could look at in the future, or now if directed to do so by council. But the intent of it now is to not have that dollar value be the deterrent of rolling this program out. There may be some people who are already saying, I park on my street every night. Why do I now have to pay $50 to park on my street, right? So there may be that feeling if we were going to start with a very high initial rate. But even looking at like Calgary's today, for example, the rate for residential neighborhoods was $45 a year. So we looked at some other areas that $50 a year is higher than some other jurisdictions, and it's much lower than like a downtown commercial area. But we thought it was a good starting point.
Okay, just one more if I may. I'm just thinking about the, so say in a particular block, you got, I don't know, a few multi-family buildings, perhaps several hundred people there, maybe a dozen parking spaces on the street. I haven't gone and figured that out, but I'm just projecting that might be a scenario. So would we limit the amount of, knowing that there's only a certain number of spaces? I know that you would want to have some amount of turnover, but would you give a permit to anybody on that block who wanted one? Or would it be limited to, we only really have a certain number that we could realistically accommodate?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe, the intent at this time would be to give one to anyone who came in and wanted one. It could be for, a guest who is just here every other weekend, or could be many other reasons why someone might use it. It might not be used all the time by everybody. We would have to see how the demand was. In our downtown parking lots, it is a first come, first served basis. So even if you have a parking pass, if the lot's full, you still can't park there. So this would be treated the same way.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? I see a second time, but I have one question, first time speaker. I just wanted to clarify the 67% of property owners to support the initiative. Now, that's something that that staff have kind of put in, because it seems like you're recognizing some people may not want this, even though they've recognized a problem on your street, and you're trying to be very cautious about it. I suspect a lot of people might just not respond, because a lot of times people don't respond. So is a non-response implied assent or refusal?
Through to the chair, I think we would do it based on respondents. So if there was only a quarter of the people responded, as long as 2/3 of those agreed with it, we would move forward with it.
Okay, thanks. I think if there's a way we can make it very clear to the residents when the notice goes out that the more people respond, because otherwise, a minority who want it may end up deciding for them. And if they didn't say anything, that would, thanks. I guess I have Councillor Novak, and then Mayor McNeil Smith will be a first-time speaker, followed by Councillor Novak and Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to staff, just one question, or a couple of questions, sorry. The report says that if this pilot is successful over a 6 to 12 month period, it could be expanded to other areas. We understand the priorities of 3rd Street and 1st Street. if after the first pilot, let's say it's 3rd Street, would staff be bringing a report back to council before proceeding with future areas?
Through to Mayor McNeil Smith, that's not the intent. The intent would be that if it was successful, we would continue to roll it out. If there was issues and we needed more direction from council, we would bring it back at that time. However, if council directed us to bring it back before we rolled it out to the next area, we can definitely do that. There is a chance that 3rd Street respondents say no, and then we would have to move to the next area right away. And so just keep that in mind if you were to direct us to come back before moving to the next area.
Okay, so a follow-up. So if we're calling it a pilot for 6 to 12 months, there will be an assessment of that at the end. But staff are indicating that if it's successful, it started on 3rd. It's indicating that the second priority would be 1st. If that was deemed successful, then staff would then identify or not a future area, and would only come back to council, as you say, if there was if through the analysis there was some challenges to be considered.
That's correct. Or if there were budgetary impacts, at this point, it doesn't seem like there will be additional at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Novak, go ahead for a second time.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to staff. I'm just thinking about something that you said a bit earlier, and I want to get some clarification on that. Is the intent that the parking pass is portable, meaning that a resident could purchase a parking pass and put it on any vehicle that he wishes for the period of time where it's needed, say for a member of his family or a guest visiting for a week, or other times the pass might just sit on his kitchen counter?
Through to Councillor Novak, yes, that's the intent, that it would be portable initially. If we did find that it's being abused, we see a lot of them for sale on used Victoria or something, then we would adjust that, and that would be a time where we would come back and get more feedback from council. If we wanted to just make it, like, we could make it, we're going to have Robbins Parking enforce this, so we could make it so it's by license plate only. But at this time, we wanted to give residents flexibility to be able to give a pass to a visitor rather than making it on their car only.
Thank you. That's the answer I was looking for. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Duck for a second time, and then McNeil Smith.
I'm prepared to move the recommendation.
Okay. Go ahead. Are you okay with that? All right.
And I so move that the council endorse this plan for a residential parking program, and 2, that the on-street parking policy be brought to a future regular council meeting for adoption.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Or I guess look for the mover to motivate.
Yeah, I think this is a good step, and I think the program and proposal that staff have brought is a good step. And we have a good track record in terms of the town parking and how the permits have worked there. And I think it's we can use that experience to show it. And I was part of a business that used those things, and yes, it was transferable and very easy to monitor. And I think an expansion to these residential areas within 300 meters is a good. The pilot will demonstrate whether we need to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And the seconder.
Thank you, Chair. Just very supportive of this. Thank you to staff for bringing it forward. My only question is, or my second question, that the on-street parking policy be brought to a future council meeting. The staff want to see the pilot underway. The intention would be to perhaps bring it back after the first pilot is assessed.
Through to the mayor, no, the intent, like, we could have the policy approved during the next council meeting if council felt comfortable with that, and then if modifications were required because the pilot program just wasn't quite working how we were thinking it would, we would bring that back for an amendment.
Okay, so follow up. So, I mean, this is a committee of the whole. These recommendations are going to council next council meeting. If the second part of the motion was just worded that the on-street parking policy be approved, in essence, that's the intent of staff would be, we would just consider that approval next week. We understand the intent. I'm not going to amend the motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Novak?
Thank you. I'm actually not in favor of this for a few reasons. So the issue of parking shortage that we find ourselves in downtown is kind of one that we have helped create in terms of the policies that we've made in terms of parking requirements. And so we've provided less parking than other jurisdictions do, and than what used to be provided in the past. And part of that was, listening to the development community and about wanting to, it's expensive to have parking spaces, and so to try and keep the costs down by providing less parking. The other thing is mode shift, recognizing that people who make a decision to buy into a condo that maybe only has one parking space, they know what they're getting into, they know there's limited parking, and what we're wanting to do is encourage people, as staff have indicated, to use transit or active transportation. So I see this program being contradictory to those goals. So it seems to me that the town is now taking on the responsibility and the cost of providing virtually free parking to individuals who made a decision to buy a condo that did not have enough parking to meet their needs. And so I have some concerns about that. Also, in terms of mode shift, if what we're wanting to do is for people to use active transportation or transit, making it easier for them to have virtually free on-street parking just seems to contradict that. And I guess I just, again, worry about having something like this in a particular area. The people who are parking there for whatever reason, whether it's because they're people in condos that have 2 or 3 cars, or they're people who are working in Sidney, or they're coming to visit the town, they'll still have a need to find a place for their car. And I guess I worry that this will just push the problem out a bit further to others. So I don't see it being a solution. So yeah, that's where I landed it at this time. Thank you.
Councillor Novak?
Thank you, Chair. I have similar concerns to my colleague here. One of the reasons I moved to Sidney 7 or 8 years ago was the small town vibe, the fact that you could park on the street and nobody cared. And at that time, I lived in what would be considered within that downtown core. I lived on Oakville and 2nd. And I'm concerned that this might be the thin edge of the wedge, and taking Sidney from that small town vibe into a densified, more challenging type of environment for people who want to come and live here. That being said, and like I said, I'm of mixed minds. That being said, a lot of this is beyond our control. The densification of Sidney is something that is being thrust upon us in some way by the government, although we have our own official community plan even before that Bill 44 came through that is already starting to look at densification. I'm concerned about the fact that I don't see this as addressing parking problem areas that have been identified in certain parts of the town, notably the All Bay area, notably the Rest Haven area near McDonald Park, where the parking density on street is excessive, I'm told, by people who live there. And we're not really tackling that problem or those problems. All that being said, I feel that I should support this because, like it or not, we're moving in that direction, and we do need to have some type of a regulatory framework to deal with parking over a long period of time. And I would like to see what the community says when we go out to them for this pilot project. It may very well come back to us, they say, sorry, no thanks, and the whole program just gets pushed off to the side. So from that perspective, I'll support the motion, but I just wanted to highlight my concerns that it's not that the program is not necessarily solving all of the problems that the town may have with parking.
I think, if staff can ever come up with a program that solves all of the problems, I think we'll require a very heavy bonus that year for them. Councillor Rintoul, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'll support the motion. Look, this is a pilot program. This is being put forward in policy, which can be amended. So no, I don't know that this is a perfect approach. I do like the built-in option for a particular residential area to opt in or opt out of the program. I think that provides some flexibility. We've identified some time ago in the 2022 downtown parking study that this was a recommendation. This is something that needed to be addressed. I think it's a step in the right direction to explore this, and that's what we're doing through the pilot program. I'll support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Garnett?
Thank you, Chair. Likewise with Councillor Rintoul, I'll support the motion, and mainly because it is a pilot, and so we'll learn. If nothing else, we're going to get information from this. The community thinks we've lost our minds trying it, or they're going to think it's a worthwhile endeavor. We've had areas where people have complained over the years, and I don't think it's completely fair to say that this is a problem of our own making. When I look at 3rd Street, the vast majority of the townhouses and buildings on that street have been there for decades, long before the policy on parking was changed. So it may be forces in the inside of the interior community is forcing things outward, possibly, but we can't possibly know that for sure. And having driven these areas multiple times, 3rd Street and 1st Street, if you find a parking spot, it's like winning a lottery. Like it's in those sections, it's insane how they're always full. So I'll continue to support this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I support this because I think it's entirely consistent with the direction we've been going with having a parking study in the first place. We came up with a parking study to identify where the problem areas were and what potential suites of solutions would address those particular problems. On-street parking pass, street metering, and actually looking at parking utilization rates. All of these things are entirely in keeping with each other and do not conflict at all. And so after reviewing parking utilization rates downtown and discovering that in an average multifamily building that parking utilization for these spots was, we gave 1 spot because parking utilization, particularly in the older buildings where there's more senior residents who don't drive, was on average 0.8 to I believe 1.1. That means 1 spot per residence was an ideal amount. If there are people moving in with multiple cars, and there will be some of those people will be parking on the street. So the next thing that we do when that becomes a problem and that we are not actually sopping up the overflow that wasn't captured in the average, then we come up with an on-street pass, and we are not giving it away for free. In fact, right now we are giving away that parking for free. What this is actually internalize some of the cost of that parking at a lower rate. The third thing that we would do, and of course people advocated for this in our most overparked areas on Beacon, is of course street metering, but that becomes much more expensive, and it becomes something that you do in larger urban centers. So this is kind of stage 2 in actually internalizing the cost of people's vehicle use based on the amount of parking our town actually needs, and making sure that the cost on the community is not borne in excess of what the cost for an individual to make their choice, their free choice, to have an additional car. We did have a presentation from the business community earlier talking about how many people live and work in Sidney. And I know that many of the people who do not, if you are not living in Sidney and working in Sidney and you're commuting outside it, again, if Sidney's more expensive, then these are choices people are making, and people really do have to adapt their lifestyles. I know I did not move to Sydney because I chose to live here. I moved to Sydney because my job moved here, and then I had to find a place to live. So I understand a lot of people have complete freedom of choice in moving up here. They liked the lifestyle. Then they're going to have to adapt themselves to the town that they have chosen with all freedom to move to. And those of us who have to move here, because this was where our job was, we already knew we had to adapt because we adapted simply by moving. And so I think that if people do not want to make this particular step of adaptation, that will be up to them, but it will not be because we failed to pick an appropriate solution of charging for the parking and inducing the mode shift and addressing internalizing the costs and taking that off of the community and making people internalize their choices again. So with that, I will look to see if there's any speakers for a second time. Does not look like it. Then I will call, oh, go ahead, Mayor McNeil-Smith.
Thank you. Yes, I guess I'm speaking for a second time after seconding the motion. We're aware, well, we have the boundaries as is shown on the map for our downtown commercial area. And then to the north and to the south of that, we have higher density residential. And we know that in that higher density residential, we have a lot of employees on both the south and north side parking on 3rd, 4th, 5th, on both sides of 7th, on both sides of where the streets are on both sides of the commercial district. And what we've heard, I've had residents from this section of 3rd Street, I've had residents from this section referred to of 1st Street, I've had residents come from the section of 7th Street between Sidney Avenue James White and the school, come forward and say that employees are parking there early, and that there are no parking spots for their visitors or their service vehicles, whether they're having their internet connected or they're having groceries delivered, or what have you. And those are the people that we've heard from. Now, in listening to my colleagues, I do appreciate that in each of those areas there are now, in some cases it's been for a while, but there are more multi-unit buildings in those areas. And yes, while they provide one-to-one parking in general, and some people have 2 vehicles, yes, some of that parking in those areas is people with a second vehicle. And so I understand the point that's being made. Does this program benefit those people with second vehicles, or does it benefit the residents who don't have a second vehicle and they don't have a space, or there isn't a space in those sections during the day for their visitors or service vehicles to come to their homes. So I believe, knowing, having had employees for nearly 25 years now, and listening to all their parking woes, I know where they choose to park. And the incentive here by having this is that those employees who will no longer be able to park in that stretch will have to consider things like the underused employee parking lot at Mary Winspear. Or for myself, I found it necessary to purchase parking in a private lot closer to my building. So there are choices.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. Councillor O'Keefe, second time.
Thanks. To getting to the point of the, we heard similar comments from All Bay residents about they have sufficient parking space, but it was for people come to visit, trade workers, and that, those sorts of things. And so similar concern. So, again, my concern is that we're using that example that people living in downtown condos need spaces for visitors and tradespeople coming to visit. And so we're gonna provide passes for them. So it's difficult for me to, look at Old Bay and say that we wouldn't do the same. So just another reason why I'm not in favor of the motion. Thank you.
All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Okay, I see 6 in favor. All those opposed? Oh, sorry, I had Councillor Novak, were you in favor or opposed? You're in favor, okay. Councillor O'Keefe is opposed. The motion carries. And I will look. We have nothing else on our agenda. So I will look for a motion to
Move to adjourn?
adjourn. Thank you. And seconded. All in favor? Carries unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you.